And we're live.
Hey.
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 All right. Hi, everybody. Hope y'all are doing well. Welcome back to Bashment Book Club. Today's book club live show, we'll be discussing Brother by David Chariandi.
Woo.
We have different editions. I think I have a hardcover and you'll have the paperback.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Cute. Okay. So, summary for Brother. If I were to say like a non-spoilery summary, I would go with what's in the actual like summary on the jacket, which is that it's a story about a Trini Canadian guy in Toronto and his relationship with his brother. So his name is Michael, his brother is Francis. It kind of looks at the kind of impact that his brother Francis has had on his life. And it's about police brutality and the kind of struggles that people from Black and Brown and immigrant communities in Toronto have to go through on a daily basis. And that's pretty much all I could say without spoiling. Because
But we are going to be spoiling for people who are here.
Usually we start like the first like two minutes of the live show just kind of saying what the book is about for people who might know. And then they scurry away and come back when they've already
read it.
Yeah. So that's kind of the summary for the book. It kind of has two timelines, but the summary doesn't tell you that because when you start reading the book, you kind of realize something happened in their life. And that's pretty much all we could say without spoiling you at this point. So
one more thing we can say without spoiling is how did we feel about the book? Vaguely. Would you recommend it?
Okay.
Yes, I would. I would.
Same. So good. It was beautiful.
I think you have to be in the right mind space because I think sometimes when I assume when the books are shorter, they don't cover heavy topics because how can you do that in like 200 words or whatever? And this is a roller coaster, right? Because I think the author, presents a topic, does a flashback, gets you angst, brings you back to the present. Something happens, move back to the present. So you got to be in the right headspace, man. And I wish somebody would have warned me.
I feel like I was the only one prepared for this book because it's like one, it was written by somebody who we published at work, and two, I knew all the awards it had won, so I was like prepared. I knew the narrative around it.
I did not expect whatsoever, and I was just devastated. I was like, "Oh, so it's a depressing book."
I'm the one that suggested it, in case you could not tell.
Brand.
Pick a book for another two shows.
I'm not allowed to choose any more depressing books because I chose Here Comes the Sun too. So,
oh my god,
starting off our years with depression like you're supposed to.
Happy Black History Month.
Valid. Okay, so we're gonna get into spoiler territory now. So if you have not read this book, please depart and return. Unless you don't mind spoilers, then welcome. You might not understand anything we're talking about. So the first question I wrote down when I was reading this is what you guys thought about the Trinidadian rep from the mom who is the like immigrant to Canada who still has like the accent. So what did you think of that?
So for someone who's not from Trinidad, I read her story in what I perceive to be the sing-songy accent. So I like, especially when she's like, "You're hiding," you know what I mean? Like I could hear it in my mind, and I felt like this is a good example of a book where the cadence of the language shows up really well. And it doesn't feel exaggerated. It didn't feel forced. It felt like natural, especially when she was giving instructions. Don't lock the door. Don't go on the street. Like he weaves in like colloquial.
I get those instructions too.
It just felt natural. And I was like, yes, this felt right.
Yeah, and it's it was a lot better than other books that try to do the same thing. So T.
I just know, like, when I was reading it, I was remembering, like, we had private discussions in group chats recently about, like, dialogue in books that are about Caribbean people and the fine line you have to walk as an author, right? But, like, I like the fact that he said she was speaking the Queen's English,
right,
which, like, helped with, like, the story itself, the dialogue, the writing. It just made more sense, especially, like you said, when the little colloquialism slipped in and they felt more natural, because that is how people would speak here if they're, like, code switching.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. My favorite scene in the book was when they came to Trinidad. Like, there was a flashback scene where they talked about their trip to Trinidad, and it was really weird. It was almost uncomfortable, but, like, not in a bad way, to read it, because it's like people experience the same place differently. Because to me, Trinidad is just home. It's my everyday. It's my life. But to these boys, it was this kind of new, strange place that they're supposed to feel connected to, but they don't. And it kind of speaks to the way that, Caribbean writers in the diaspora, whether it be immigrants or children of immigrants or whatever, have this way of writing about the Caribbean with this tinge of, like, nostalgia and disconnect and longing and all that kind of stuff. So to read about Trinidad in that light, for me, was really, really interesting, and it made me feel uncomfortable because, like, the way in which the environment was described was familiar to me, but there was a different tone to it than what I'm used to, because it was being experienced by people who experience a different emotion being in Trinidad. So I liked that.
I also felt like on the car ride back to the airport, there was a conversation between Ruth and her sister, and I felt that. I think that was the first time I was like, "Oh, this is good. Something is going to be painful," because I think when we talk about privilege, right? Sometimes there's this hard example, and that was a really good example of her sister talking about, "You were able to get out. I'm jealous of you. We used to do all of these things together," and not having Ruth not being honest about how she's struggling. So I think there are a lot of Caribbean people who aren't able to leave and assume that once you leave the island, your life is, like, perfect, right? And
Yeah,
then
that's definitely true.
And then there's that whole, I mean, I don't know if you all felt it, but Ruth reminded me of my mother in terms of, I'm sacrificing so much for you. You need to fall into the immigrant exceptionalism category. You're not a criminal, you can't. And so, like, that scene, I felt it. It was like, I can remember my mom having conversations about why we left with her friends and her families, because she wanted a different life for us. I mean, now I say all of that to say that we did fit the stereotype of, immigrant exceptionalism because we're doing fine. But, I was so sad.
Yeah, I feel like Trinidad, like the part where they go back to Trinidad, that part really hit for me, like, because I remember when I moved here and experienced, like, a different standard of living, suddenly everything that felt like just normal to me growing up in Barbados, when I went back, I would, like, take a couple days to settle back in and remember, like, oh, we don't have running hot water, it's chill, like, have to heat water up on the stove, whatever. So, like, that bit where they felt like they noticed, like, they were talking about, like, the bugs, like the creatures that they hear, all this kind of stuff that you just don't experience living in a city like Toronto. That part, like, I felt very seen with it. But yeah, like, the exceptionalism was something I never experienced because I made the choice to come back here to Canada myself, and also I came back to, like, my Canadian family, so, like, my Barbadian family still lives in Barbados. So I feel like everything from that was, like, self-driven, but, like, I still understood the worries she had just from experiences being up here. Like, the whole thing where they're talking about how when they went to the mall, all the people would, like, scrutinize them a little more thoroughly. Just reminds me, like, when I go to a drug mart near my workplace, the security guard always watches me, and I'm like, sir, I've been here multiple times. I'm just buying pads. Like, leave me alone and let me do my business.
Yeah.
It was so good, and I want to talk a little bit about Francis because I found his character. I want to jump ahead to the end. Do y'all think he was gay?
Yes, 100%. I was reading it that way. I was reading him and Jelly being
A couple.
in a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the
But
thing
what
is,
about
Chariandi
the
wrote.
dad? That part.
Did y'all think Manny was his dad, the guy from the convenience store? Or was that just me?
Oh, I didn't read that. So.
No. Wait, I thought maybe the dad across the hall, Aisha's.
Oh no, definitely no way. They would not do that because Aisha and Michael.
No, I'm saying, did he have a relationship with Francis?
Oh no, I don't think so.
Because remember, towards the end, he was talking about we had I wanted to say this before he left for the hospice, right? I had a special relationship with your brother, and I was like,
I didn't read it like that. I just read it as like the father figure thing that Michael was thinking. Like he was looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't read it like that at all.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like maybe Aisha's dad was somebody who Francis confided in. You know, he might have been the only person Francis kind of came out to or something, and maybe he was accepting of him or something. That's what I felt from it.
Let's hope, because I was like, do not drop this.
He wouldn't write. Yeah, no, he wouldn't.
Of the book and not explain it. Yeah.
That's one of the things that I liked about this book, because it's so short. It's very minimalist in the writing. So Chariandi writes it in a way where you kind of have to read in between the lines.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to read in between the lines, but like there's a lot of stuff in this book that's implied that you don't really see on the surface, because all of these characters have one thing in common, and that's that they repress and they bottle everything in. And I think that could speak to, like, you know, wider problems that you would see in Black and brown communities or poor communities and stuff like that. People repress stuff and keep things in. People don't talk about things and communicate about the problems that they might be experiencing as much. So I think that actually ran through, like, the way in which the book was written in such a way where it's kind of like you have to read between the lines and you have to, like, read into the silences and all of the implication was really true to the actual personality of the main protagonist as well as the characters around him. So I like that. But back to the dad. That was the dad at the funeral, right? At
Francis' 100%.
Yes.
It had to be.
In a brown suit. Yes.
So,
I believe
yes. So I kind of had this. So remember that his supervisor in the grocery store or the convenience store used to like
lecture him.
Basically, he used to lecture him, and he used to, like, literally spy on him. And I'm like, why are you so invested in this guy? And in the last scene where we see him, he talks about, you know, you need to think about your future. And I'm like, why do you care so much about your employee? And it kind of struck me like,
do you think they're related?
I was thinking, what if that's the dad, and what if A, he doesn't know because he hasn't really seen his dad in a long time since the funeral, or B, he knows that it's his dad, but because he's kind of an unreliable narrator, because he doesn't let us know, he doesn't let the reader know that Francis is gay, even though he himself knew that, right? So he might be kind of like an unreliable narrator in the sense that he is in denial about his supervisor being his dad, or maybe he just didn't recognize him. I don't know, but it just
I thought they were
me
about the same age, though. No?
Yeah, I thought Manny was like a little bit older than him.
Yeah,
it's just like I felt like that was very like, yeah, there will be people who are like nosy at your business, and
but not
like it felt more
level.
like he was trying to be. It felt like he was trying to be controlling. Like he was trying the same thing where he would hire undocumented immigrants so that he could pay them less and take their money.
Yeah.
So it felt like it was a way for him to exert power, to be like, you can't be friends with this person or else I'm gonna fire you. It's just like a guy having a power trip. That's how I read it. Like, just the small powers people of color can take.
Right.
They will, like, some of them abuse it, sort of like
the oppressed become the oppressor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's how I read that.
That makes I didn't remember about his age, because from the time he said he started talking about his future and the way he would lecture him, I'm like, this like a dad, like what? And then I was like
he obviously was trying to help in his backwards way of being controlling. He was trying to make sure he does well.
But I think a lot of Caribbean people have that weird, not a lot. There's some Caribbean people that have that weird I want the best for you, but how it comes out is very condescending. It's laced with abusive language, whether misogynistic or homophobic. And so it was kind of like, this community was made up of immigrants, but they weren't talking openly about, clearly there were boys that needed the support because they were coming out there, and then the mental health issue of Ruth, like, come on, so great that you left food, but nobody was really supporting her outside of, is it Miss Helen,
yeah.
yeah. Now I know we all know a Miss Helen who just
It's
inserts
true.
herself in everybody, but yeah, it was definitely an interesting community dynamic. But what I don't understand is, why did the dad deny them when they came to the building, but then showed up at the funeral? Do you think
I
that
feel
was
like that's
about guilt?
that's a human thing. I feel like he didn't want to have to acknowledge the fact that he left them. He didn't want that in his life, so he was like, "Nah, I'm not seeing y'all." And then he came to the funeral because his son's dead.
Yeah, because the least you could do is at least attend your son's funeral. I mean, yeah, you abandoned him, but the least you could do.
Like, he couldn't offer them anything better than the mom was offering them too. So I feel like he didn't want to have to acknowledge that fact that he left to like find a better like future for himself, and he didn't even do that.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Precious. Precious is
thanks, Precious.
Enjoying
and
the conversation.
At least I hope that's how you say that.
How did you guys feel?
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, how did you guys feel about, okay, so like it wasn't explicitly stated that Francis and Jelly were in a relationship, but it was implied through like everything basically when they were on page together. How did you feel about like that representation of queerness in the Caribbean / immigrant community compared to other books we've read where things are like more hyper violent when it comes to that?
It's interesting because I think this is the first book where we've read like a queer Caribbean book where it takes place not in the Caribbean, so in an immigrant community. It was strange because I think it has a lot to do with, this book is told from Michael's perspective, and Michael seems like a very repressive person, so he's not really giving us a lot, but we're seeing it through his eyes, and we're actually seeing what's going on even though he's not telling us. And so for me, I actually didn't really pick up on the fact that Francis was gay. Like, I suspected when, girls would watch him, but he would show little interest. And then at some point I was like, he doesn't have a girlfriend, which, I mean, he doesn't have to, but, you'd think this boy who's out there and who has all these, like, the social network, you'd think he'd have like a girlfriend or something. And I don't know. It's hard for me to say because I don't know what Toronto is like in terms of, acceptance of queerness. And then there's also layers to it. So people in Toronto might be accepting, but it might be a different situation in like a working class community versus like, a more middle class community or whatever. So it was difficult for me to speak to the like anything Caribbean representation in this book because it's really not I don't want to say it's not a Caribbean story. It's a Canadian story with a Caribbean intersection to it.
Yeah.
That's their history, that's their background, so it's connected in that way. But I can't really speak to the experience or the representation of like a queer Trini character in Toronto. So I don't know like if it was done well or whatever. And I know that some people have like an issue with like books where a spoiler is that one of the characters was gay. But I don't think that this is necessarily a book like that. It's a book where it's kind of just implied, but just not really mentioned. Yeah.
Which I think is probably good, right? Like, you don't have to, nobody explicitly said that Michael is hetero,
Yeah.
Because so it's really interesting when he was retelling it, I thought it was the opposite way around. I thought Francis was protecting Michael from not being soft, implying that he was gay, right? And then it wasn't until the first time he meaning Michael, went to Desiree's
Yeah,
and
that's when I
did
caught
that.
on.
Yeah, that's when I caught on. I was like, oh, okay, where, you know. And then when he actually had sex with Aisha, I was just like, oh, so is he bi or is he? So anyway, I thought it was the other way around initially, until like some of the scenes with Jelly, which I thought was so soft and so sweet.
It was beautiful.
It was so intimate with like
warm
just the description of like touching of his arm. I thought it was like such a sweet way to not like hypersexualize something that intimate, but I felt it. I was like, oh, Francis.
Yeah, I recognized it because you knew, like, you were sort of, you thought it was Michael because of the way Francis was protecting him, but then you realize it's because Francis realizes like how he would be treated if people, like, if he was like openly gay. So he's protecting his brother, knowing what he would struggle with himself. Yeah, and that was like what made it beautiful. Yeah.
This book has a lot to say about like masculinity, because I mean, it's
that's what I was
about, you know,
ask.
Francis is kind of like a very hyper masculine person in terms of his personality. And I felt like after I realized, you know, that he might be gay, I felt like maybe that hyper masculinity might be a form of compensation for him. And I feel like, do you all think the mother realized or knew at some point? Because there was a point where she told him to grow up and be a man or something. And there was like a tension between him and the mother. And I don't know if like maybe the mother knew or had like a suspicion or something. And perhaps the reason why she grieved for him so much, because I mean, obviously she's very ill in the book because she's grieving for her son who died. But maybe there's a tinge of guilt as well, because maybe, you know, I can't help thinking maybe she knew or she caught on or she had an idea, but because she didn't try to help him or talk to him about it or accept him, you know, she might have felt a little bit guilty after he died that she wasn't there to sort of, you know, be there for him in that way.
Interesting that you say that. I was reading, so, and this is going to be off on the tangent. I've been reading about emotional incest. So it's essentially when you project partner roles onto your children. So it's not sexual, it's nothing like that. But you really, there's a child that assumes certain roles as a partner. And that's what I was reading into it. Now it's fresh in my brain, right? So I was thinking more of Frances assumed a role that she wanted her, you know, the dad to do, like he was bringing home groceries. And so she lost that kind of partnership, and she didn't get to resolve or apologize for the things that happened before he left, because they had a huge argument right before he first left, right? And so she didn't have somebody to like offset some of the strain anymore. That's what I was reading, why she tipped over, because she didn't have the emotional support or the things, you know, when she came home tired anymore, because Michael wasn't doing it and he was stepped up, but she was already grieving by the time he did it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I read it completely differently too. So I read it, the tension being a Black mother trying to help her sons navigate a world which isn't like
fair,
which isn't kind to them.
Yeah.
So she wants him to grow up, wants him to realize like what he needs to do in order to survive, and he's not really doing what she thinks he needs to be. So there's a resentment on both sides of that relationship. So the mom's resentful that he's not doing what she thinks he should be. He's resentful that he has to do these things, like step up and be like the father figure in that. Yeah. So that's what I was reading into me. And she was upset that when he came back, she was coddling him. She wants to take care of him when he's like all beaten up. And I feel like she was mourning like the loss of a child that she never really got to protect.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
No, I'm depressed all over again. It's fine.
Yeah.
That's why I love this book, because it's written, because it's so short and because it's so, you know, the way that it's written, you could interpret it in many different ways and you could read into it in many different ways. And it could be that all of the things that we're saying might have some truth to it.
Yeah. What do you feel so Desiree's, I thought, was an important side character. So do you think it was a barbershop for all Black boys or for queer Black boys in the community?
Ooh, that's a good question. Huh. I think it was just like their space for like the Black boys in that community, like the immigrant boys, a place for them where they could be themselves and not have to worry about like posturing.
Yeah, but there was still very hyper masculine, you know, toxic behaviors there. So I was just like, is it a little bit of both? Because you know, part of why certain spaces, especially in high crime, high poverty areas like a community center or a barber shop or the church, basketball court, certain places are like not touched because it's like protected by the community. And so I was starting to think like everybody saw the, you know, the interactions with Francis and Jelly, but if it was a hyper masculine, very toxic environment, would that be allowed, especially in a Black barbershop, right? But then I was just like, no other character from the barbershop read as queer, right? And so I was just like, I couldn't really say either way, but I thought that the barbershop was an important milestone or a plot point for the book.
Yeah, I feel like it was the one place because Francis never even felt like at home. He could just relax and be himself. So I feel like he found those people, and that's why he went there and stayed there after the fight with his mom. I feel like he just found the right group of people where they wouldn't judge him and Jelly. Like, it just felt like a very homely space, sort of like what you find in the city. You find your spaces and you gravitate towards them. And you just stay there.
Yeah, but there was a part like when he got beat up. Didn't Jelly say he needs to be with his people?
Yes, but like he could have easily. I never read it as like queer. I just was like, oh, his people, like the people who took care of him, the people that understood him for who he was.
Okay.
But like also understand your reading of it. When you mentioned that line, I was like, oh, I see now what you're saying.
Yeah, which is the beauty of it, right? Because like the three of us definitely are interacting.
We all read different books at this point.
But all enjoyed it, so that's even better.
And you see, the thing is, y'all are talking about him and Jelly in the barbershop, and it didn't really click with me. Like, I had suspicions, but it didn't really click with me until like closer to the end of the book that I realized that he was gay. So I don't think I even read like a lot of those interactions in the barbershop as like intimate. Or maybe I just wasn't paying attention to them in that way, or I was just kind of, because the way that he's written, you know, because he's so hyper masculine, and whenever somebody's a masculine person and a masculine man, you're like, your biased assumption is that this person is straight. So to me, it just never occurred to me to think of him as not straight when I was reading the book. And I think that kind of speaks to another thing that happens a lot when you're reading books and one character turns out to be queer, and you're like, oh, this is a plot twist, but then you realize it's not really a plot twist. It's just you have a bias. Yeah, you have a bias. You have like everybody's straight until proven not straight. So I think that was the thing for me when I was reading this book, because I suspected, especially when he said that he wasn't interested in the girls who were checking him out or whatever, but it never dawned on me until like the scene where Francis died, and like Michael, and Michael was like, you know, the boy that he loved, and I was like, oh, all right, okay, you know, that's when it kind of clicked. But you know, I suspect
towards the very end, though.
Yeah, I think the part that clicked in for me was when the first, like, I sort of knew when they had the interaction about the car. I was like, okay, something's going on here. They're being like very intimate, and then I was just like, maybe they're really good friends, whatever. And then the part where the police come to the first time to the barbershop when they're having like a party, and he says, "Don't touch him." I'm like, they're together 100%. He's being like super protective in a way that I was like, But yeah.
So I have a question about that, because there's a line that talks about.
It didn't even occur to me.
There's a line where Michael.
So I should know these things.
That doesn't mean anything. There's a line where Michael says that the police read a reaction as threatening, but it's something along those lines. What was it about, like, the don't touch, which I know has to be about police brutality, but it felt like it was in, you know, talking about something happening specifically to Francis, and I was like, what did I miss with like don't touch me part of the story? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Nope. I'm blanking right now.
Hold on, because I like to annotate my books. I'm like one of those people.
You're good.
Don't
I just write down questions.
I often forget to annotate. I was supposed to, especially for like the club because it's a live show, but I just forget.
I just write down questions. I don't.
Yeah, so it's on 171 where he's like, Francis panicked. Don't touch him. He said, reaching to steal the weapon. It was a gesture with history, but unreadable by those around him holding power. The authorities had investigated, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, what was the gesture?
I feel like that's just a reference to the police brutality in Toronto toward Black bodies in general. Like, that's the history, is that they constantly, still to this day, are doing that to Black communities, where they'll come into shops specifically Black owned and do this kind of thing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was pointing back to the first time when the
party.
It starts with whatever the character was that was shot in front of Francis, and then he
Antoine.
Yes. And then he got hit by the police officer. I was like, is that what that is referencing? But that makes sense too. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this book is always like, whenever people are talking about it here, it's like spouted as like the book about police brutality, but I feel like that wasn't the core point of this book.
Yeah.
It was prevalent throughout the story because it is prevalent throughout a Black person's life living in those places.
And it's a story about masculinity and boyhood and police brutality in the context of like a working class community in a North American city like Toronto is inevitably going to be associated or intersected with young boyhood and masculinity and that kind of stuff.
See, I thought it was a book about loss of freedom.
It definitely is about that too. Yeah,
it's about loss too. Yeah,
it's
about plenty things.
Yeah,
yeah.
Because there was another point in the book where they were talking about before the gunshots starts going off, like whatever time of night, where it was like calm. The baby was not was falling asleep. Everybody was going around, and then they heard the first set of gunshots, and then everybody was like on panic or on, back on. So like that little brief sense of like peace was ruined and started over the clock. I was like, oh, this is so much, but so good.
Oh yeah, when I was reading, I had to take breaks for the last like third of the book. I was like putting down the book and like crying. And I'm like, okay, it's time to start back.
Yeah,
and starting back reading. It was. Why did we choose?
I cried to like the end. I don't know. I mean, and we should have known because this book said is about like, well, police brutality is a part of it. But I find it interesting what you were saying that people kind of define the book by police brutality, but when you read it, it's so much more than that. And I think that that's because that's kind of what it's.
It was bound to happen at least once.
Come back. It's a book.
Did I lose your?
Yeah. Oh.
You still losing us, sir.
Did I lose you?
Okay, you're good now. You're good now. Okay. You're like, what the fuck just happened? You're good. We heard the beginning of your police brutality. Can you not hear us? Oh no.
We can hear it. We can
did
see
something happen?
Are you good?
Oh my gosh, what's happening?
Was I disconnected?
No, you were just frozen.
Okay. What was I saying?
Oh my god, we were talking about police brutality and then you just disappeared and it was like,
okay.
Oh no.
No, I was saying and then you all disappeared. I didn't disappear. I hate technology.
We're still
okay.
here.
So what were you saying, sir?
I was saying that I find it interesting how you say that people like over there pitch this as the book about police brutality, and I think that did I freeze again?
Yeah, but you're good. No, just take it slow.
Y'all hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
This is the wrong point of the live show for it to be sticky, so you're back.
Oh, Jesus. Am I back?
Yes,
You're back.
we can hear you.
Oh, wow. Oh, God. Okay, I'm
These
back.
stills,
All right.
man. Oh, it's so funny.
I can't even remember what I was trying to say.
Okay, so you just said twice.
I think I was saying
Police
that,
brutality book.
I
Those words are just making this live show. The
I
police are
think
onto us.
I would think I was trying to say that.
FBI.
Okay, well, let's call it something else.
Yeah, the
I don't know. Let's
FBI
come up
is
with a code
watching
word
us.
for it. So some. Yeah.
It's funny that they're calling it brutality book because
So the police brutality in this book.
we wait for the freeze.
Did I?
No,
I
keep
keep
going.
freezing every time. You know what?
You're
I
going.
think that all I was trying to say was I think it's interesting that you said that people see this as the book about PB, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think that that's because it's kind of marketed as that because it's in like the summary. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And so people kind of read that and would read the book as that.
Mm-hmm.
Did I make my point? Did you hear me?
You did. We heard it this time.
Okay.
Yeah, I really
Okay.
I thought the one thing I didn't expect was I didn't like Aisha.
I was gonna ask about her, what our thoughts were. I felt like she was a very like tertiary character.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like she took away Michael's agency when he was like, "We're not ready. I need," you know what I mean? And I get it. Like he would have kept saying that, but she was just making decisions for him and his space, inviting all of these people, and not considering how that could potentially be too overstimulating. I was like, "What you doing, girl? This ain't right." And they're not really even apologizing.
And the book kind of makes it seem that, she's doing the right thing.
No, she's not. Mm-mm. I mean,
I don't know. I just didn't feel like she was
and the
like
book
I
kind
didn't
of
understand her
made it
importance.
seem like she was doing like.
Saajid.
I'm sticking again.
Oh no!
Nah,
just finish
you're
your
good.
thought.
Yeah, just finish your thought.
Okay, hold on. Let me see. Hold on. Let me just see something. Let me see something.
Oh gosh! Don't do it! Don't do it!
Okay, so this is my laptop. Can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Right. I'm on my laptop now.
Are you?
I forgot what I was saying.
Mm-mm. You are not.
Oh, how are you doing? Let's just take a break in the middle of the live show. Oh, here he is.
Oh, here. Hello. No, I can't hear anything.
Anyway, we're down to 2.
Yeah. What else did you think about the book?
I was obsessed with it. I read it all basically in one sitting.
Me too.
Because it is such a short book, and you just I didn't realize the passing time when I was reading it because it's so interesting, and I feel like the way he wrote. Oh, he's back. Okay, welcome back.
I've been listening to you, so just keep saying what you were saying.
I was just gonna say that the alternate timelines was really interesting because I wasn't expecting it, but I feel like it really enhanced the story. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love that too.
I got confused a little bit with the flashbacks and then moving back to the present. I was like, wait a minute, can you finish your thought? But then there was this opening line about memory, how it's like flawed, and I was like, I wonder if this is like an example of going back and forth in terms of Michael being an unreliable narrator, if his memory is like, there are glimpses of things that he remembers, he thinks about it, there's that internal dialogue, and then he's zapped back to the present. So I was like, well, maybe that's what it was. I don't know, but I really enjoy it all the time.
Yeah, I liked it. I like stories about time and memory and showing how the past affects the present, like, and life doesn't exist in a vacuum. So I really liked that aspect of it. And I think that I think that, nobody kind of really like the book or the publisher, whoever, didn't want you to go into this book knowing that Francis died. That's something that you kind of have to realize when you get like a couple pages into it. And if the double timeline is kind of part of has to do with his death, because it's about how his death ultimately affected them in the long run.
So it's interesting that you said that, because I didn't read the back, but I thought he just ran away.
Really?
Yeah. So I was just like, well, what happened to Francis? And then, he left. I was like, oh, is this a story about him repeating what his dad did? Like walking out on Michael and the mom? And then I was like, oh no, he's dead. I wasn't prepared for that, because I had already created this whole other story in my mind that Francis was living in an adjacent community, and but far away enough where he wouldn't cross paths with Michael and Ruth until we get to the end. And
I think I need to reread this book.
But you knew something happened to Francis. You just didn't know towards the end. So for me, that's what I thought it was going to be. And then I think that's when I texted suspected. You guys. I just let out a breath I was holding, because I had literally read the line that he died, and I was actually holding my breath.
Wild. That is so interesting for me to hear you guys say that, because I knew
you didn't know until he was.
Yeah.
Wow. I knew going into it, because obviously I was spoiled since it was like part of this readathon we have in Canada every year last year. So I knew that Francis dies. So going into it, I was prepared. I'm very sorry. I thought it was
say in the summary that he dies.
Okay. I didn't know that. I thought it was common knowledge.
I didn't read the summary.
If you read the summary, the summary does not say that it's a dual timeline book. It just says it's about a brother named Michael and Francis, and they're of Trinidadian descent, and it's about police brutality. So I thought that it's police brutality in the Black and brown community. So when you read the summary, that's the impression you get, and I think that's why people sort of define the book by police brutality, because I think that's what the book is kind of marketed as. Maybe because that's probably like a topical thing, and they know that people will want to read it.
And the year it came out specifically, it was a huge.
It was.
That's why I didn't know that he died until. And it wasn't until I got into the book and I saw that it's kind of in a flash, seeing Francis in the flashbacks, but not in the present. And the fact that his mother was so sickly and sad, I was like, it had to be that this boy died, and this story is about grief. And if it's about police brutality, then maybe he died because,
I thought it was one of two things. He left, or he was in jail, like wrongfully jailed. And so, and she was grieving that, because the part of like, don't be a criminal, right? So in my mind, I wasn't prepared for him to be dead. And then
from the get-go, I assumed that it was death.
Well,
I suspected that like it might be something else. Maybe I entertained the idea that maybe he just ran away or something, but like I just couldn't help but feel like he was dead. And the way that they talked about him, and also in the beginning when Aisha came, she said something about loss, and she talked about losing her father, and then she was like, I think about Francis, and Michael said something to the effect of, I feel we've both felt lost and whatnot. And I was like, oh, well, Francis dead,
No, yeah.
We just didn't know. We knew how he died because it was a story about police brutality.
Police brutality, yeah.
That's how he died. But the story is not really about figuring out, what killed him, but, what the circumstances led to that. And then as you read it, you realize it's even much more than just that. It's about masculinity and boyhood and queerness and all that different kind of stuff.
Yeah, the entire...
Oh, go ahead.
We all say...
You go page the entire...
The entire final scene. So from the moment the bodyguards or the security guards beat him up, and then he dies immediately after that, I cannot, my brain still cannot process. I had to take a break because of the pain, the black pain that was experienced just right up until death. And the fact that he was literally just trying to protect somebody else. So I feel like that was also a core part. He was always trying to protect people. I know, he's just always trying to protect people, and then that's the reason he ended up dying, is because he was trying. Yeah, sorry, to make us all cry all over again. It's cool. It's
so depressing.
Sad. It is. It's really interesting too. That even in his death, right, the police were trying to cover up, and they were trying to drop certain words and phrases. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just re-traumatizing all over again, because now you lost someone and then you're trying to convince me it was their fault. Come on now. It was so awful. The last 20 pages of this book, you should definitely be high or drink or be with your loved ones, right? Because geez, it was just heavy.
I agree.
Not that I'm condoning, drug abuse or whatever. I'm just saying you need to be in a receptive
Bashment Book Club does not condone the abuse of drugs or alcohol. Just so that it's said. Yeah. It's not that kind of bashment.
Right. I'm just saying you need to be in a good mental space for it.
For this book in general, because if you were somebody who deals with the oppression on a daily basis of being a person of color and a marginalized person in this community, make sure you're feeling healthy enough to read this kind of book, because it is unforgiving, and it'll make you think of everything that you've experienced.
And if police brutality puts you off, then this is a book that you kind of have to be careful when you read it, because it could be very triggering. I was going to talk about that with regards to the Canadian context, because oftentimes, I think America sort of dominates the conversation about, the police and violence and all of these types of conversations. And even, Americans like to stereotypically look at Canada like it's, the utopian sister cousin of America that does everything better. Yes. And, when Trump won the last elections and everybody was like, oh, I want to move to Canada. And as if Canada it wasn't built on the same values of white supremacy and has, the same experience of colonizing indigenous land and, mistreating Black and brown immigrants. Same thing, just it's not talked about as much, and it mightn't occur on the same scale because America is just a bigger country population-wise.
Yeah, more people. Yeah, I feel like also, I mentioned the year this was published, 2017, it was a big year for discussion of police brutality in Black communities. This activist, Desmond Cole, actually wrote an article about the way the Toronto Police Force actively seeks out Black people and how they discriminate against them. And he just came out with a book about that year the skin ran. It literally just came out. So I'm going to be reading that immediately after finishing this, because I feel like it'll give even more context to the book. But yeah, Canada's racist. I remember after Trump was elected, I was in the bathroom and I heard a white lady being very racist toward somebody wearing hijab, that I had to step out and be like, what the fuck? You're being so fucking disgusting. So Canada has its own problems. It's just packaged as a multicultural country. And this, if you don't believe that, just read this book. And this was set in the 90s, I think. Or the 80s. This was set 30 years ago, and some of the stuff written in this is still very relevant in 2020.
It's set in the 90s and 80s, I think because it takes place 10 years
difference.
2 years, 10-year difference in the timeline.
Cool. I'm so glad I made you guys read this really depressing book. You're welcome.
Thanks. We appreciate
It
it.
was a 5-star read though, so
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I'm glad I read it. Yeah. And I like everything about it, the way that it's written, the sort of unreliable read between the lines kind of thing, the fact that it's so short but so impactful at the same time. Like, I think it just speaks to Chariandi's talent as a writer, in my opinion. So
it had
you
me
need to read
thinking about. Say that again.
Sukunya.
I said you need to read that one, but then he also wrote a nonfiction collection to his daughter called "I've Been Meaning to Tell You," and it made me cry on the airplane while I was reading it.
Oh,
so
God.
good.
Okay.
Yep.
So it was really interesting when I was reading it. It also reminded me of like storytelling from like when I was a child. Especially there was a part where he was talking about the elaboration of stories like over time, how like the specifically what hold of the knife, like his hand was falling off, and you know, like how Caribbean people have this unique talent of telling a good story with lots of embellishment. So it was like almost a nod to like how we enjoy a good story, or in contemporary times a good tea session, you know. So I thought it was like really, really a good nod to like
Bacchanal, as we say in Trinidad.
Good times, man.
Yeah.
So this
it
is
was
the first
good.
time we've all enjoyed the same book and not be like, well.
I feel like I generally have enjoyed the books, but y'all have not. I feel like I'm very like, whatever.
So
like,
I'm the
I love
problem.
it.
I mean, the only book I didn't really care for too much was Next Year in Havana, but that was more so because of
that.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Which I think it was more so to do with the politics of it than the actual story itself, because it's a really, really well written story and it was very compelling. And I don't usually read books like that, so the fact that I enjoyed the story itself was good. I just didn't. It felt like Chanel could have go a little bit deeper with the politics, you know.
It's supposed to be a fluffy book club read.
It wasn't fluffy. It was about the Cuban Revolution. It was about the Cuban Revolution. It's not fluffy.
Well, literally, make it light and fluffy.
Yeah.
I mean,
literally, that's that book.
That's why, because the Cuban Revolution is not light and fluffy. Oh God. Yeah. But yeah. Oh, and we were going to talk about why we swapped this from the stars and the blackness between them. How many people watching the live show?
We don't need. I think it's.
I don't need to know. Okay, cool. You could spill your tea, sir. Why did we not?
I mean, I was going to. I mean, I don't want to drag the book because I mean, well, okay. So we were supposed to read The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Janota Petrus for this live show. And then I read the first 2 pages and messaged the group chat and was like, could we read something else? Because one of the main protagonists in the book is Trinidadian. The other one is an American. And the Trinidadian main protagonist, a black Trinidadian girl, her perspective is written in Creole. So the author made the decision to write her story in Creole. And it was completely and utterly misrepresentative of how Trinidadians actually speak. And I don't know if I told you all this or if I sent it to you in the group chat, but I downloaded a sample of the audiobook. And
you didn't tell me this. I don't remember.
Yeah, I played a sample of the audiobook and it sounded like not a Trinidadian accent at all. Like it sounded like a Jamaican kind of accent. Yikes. It was so bad. And I'm like, what is this? You know, and like I went on Goodreads. The book has like a really good rating, and you know everybody's like, you know, this book is this book is so good, and it's like, yeah, because Trinidadians are not reading it to tell you, like, because it's a book that's marketed towards Americans. It's published in America, right? So I just remember being so frustrated when I read those pages, and I felt like, you know, my own like language was being kind of butchered. So I kind of wanted to like put that out to y'all and see what y'all thought about, you know, people in the diaspora writing about, you know, and writing from the perspective of somebody from the region itself. And, you know, should she have taken the route of something like what Chariandi does? You know, he writes about the immigrant experience. And as you know, we were talking about before, how he kind of catches the nuances of the accent with the mother. You know, she's living in Toronto. She speaks standard English most of the time, but she reverts back to Creole, you know, depending on the context. So, like, I was gonna ask y'all, like, what are y'all thoughts in terms of, like, especially since y'all are actual immigrants, so y'all kind of live in the diaspora. So, like, what are y'all's thoughts on that whole conversation?
Well, I've already
Because
mentioned
Petrus
before.
is, yeah, she is Trinidadian American. I forgot to say that. So she grew up in America, not Trinidad, and I think one of her parents, or at least one of them, is from Trinidad.
Yeah, like I spoke in the group chat before, but I feel like if you're writing about somebody who is actually like from the Caribbean within your book and you're from the diaspora, it's the same as like somebody outside of a culture writing about that culture, because it is very different from, I noticed from like living in Toronto, we have a very big Caribbean community, mostly Jamaican, yes, but there is like a little Jamaica, and there's like places where you can go to find that. We have Caravana, but it's a completely different lifestyle to live in Barbados. And I feel like if I didn't live in Barbados and I wanted to write about that, it wouldn't be fair of me to, because I don't have the same experiences, kind of. Like if I was writing about my mom, like if it was my mom that lived in Barbados and I had never been there, hadn't grown up there, I don't feel like I would have felt comfortable to like write any story set in Barbados.
Yeah, and I think like sometimes, especially being an immigrant, I have a hard time because most people, the standard is Jamaican, and all of the islands, our language is so different. It's nuanced, and some of the accents are a little bit closer to each other. But whenever I read it, I oftentimes, the cadence of how it's written sounds Jamaican, and we're not all Jamaican, right? Like Trinidad has a very distinct accent, right? And if you can't capture stop it. If you can't capture it in a language, like because some words, you know, there's not a really good way to spell it because people are trying to read it phonetically, you know what I mean? It's like, so but you have to be able to capture it in a language, and if you're doing it secondhand, there's a lot of room for getting it wrong. And I think from your assessment, this author missed the mark.
But like also
but what so there was a lot of reviews from like second generation Caribbean reviewers who loved it because they could see themselves in the story, but didn't pick up on the language, the dialect was off. So I'm like, so how do you have that conversation? Because it is part of your history, it is a part of your identity, but you can't speak to the nuance of the dialect because you're far removed from it. So it sounds the
I was
same
gonna say, yeah. Also, like this was set modern day. It was from a teenager's perspective. Oftentimes, when I go back to Barbados, there's new sayings, there's new phrases that I have to learn over. So I feel like that's the sort of thing you just can't capture if you're not there on the island and you're trying to write that perspective.
Yeah, because one of the things she said in the very first paragraph, in addition to just the Creole just being completely inaccurate, she uses the term jagabat. And I've never really heard that term before. It sounded vaguely familiar. And whenever I show anybody the paragraph, they're like, it sounds vaguely familiar. So it seems like that was a term that people in Trinidad used to use, but don't really use it anymore. Or like, so like, and then that's the thing about being from the diaspora. The knowledge you get about the Caribbean comes from your immigrant parents who left Trinidad in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. So, you know, the ideas that you get from the Caribbean comes from them. Also, Caribbean people, we have a way of exaggerating aspects of our culture and like, and yeah, we have just a way of doing things, talking about the Caribbean in a way to kind of appeal to the foreign gaze. So like, for example, I've like traveled with my family before, and sometimes some of my relatives, when we're talking to people in the States or wherever, they'll be like, oh yeah, we're from the beautiful island of Trinidad. And I'm like, you've never called Trinidad beautiful in your life, but suddenly, you know, you're in America and suddenly you're from this exotic island. So it's like Caribbean people have a way of even like, we exaggerate abuse a lot. Like, oh yeah, you know, Caribbean people, we beat the children and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, it's not that bad, so we like exaggerate certain aspects of our culture. So I feel like if you're just hearing based on what your parents tell you, or like what you might have read about the Caribbean, or what you think you might know from the diaspora community that you live in, you're not going to be able to accurately represent Trinidad if you want to write about a character from Trinidad. I feel like if you want to do that, you have to come and live here for a while. Or,
Yeah,
you
at
know, you
least a
kind of
little
have to,
bit. Yeah.
yeah, not just like a 2-week research trip or something.
Oh,
And
You
also
have to
not in
come.
a fancy villa, and not in a fancy villa. You gotta find like an actual house where people would live and experience like the
Yeah.
community aspect of it.
And then also understand that,
6.
yeah, and also understand that Trinidad is a country. It's not a culture. It's not and I've noticed that about like the way people in the diaspora talk about their parents' countries is like, oh yeah, Trinidadians do this, Trinidadians do that, and I'm like, some Trinidadians do this. Like, you know, Trinidad is not just this one thing that it's stereotypically understood as. Like, it's a country of like 1.4 million people. You know, if you ask a Muslim Trinidadian about life in Trinidad, yeah, because
it's
for
different.
me, Trinidadian culture is fasting for Ramadan and going to mosque and growing up and learning about Islam, and you know, because that's how I grew up, and my Trinidadian story is no less Trinidadian than somebody who goes to carnival or does stuff that's more stereotypically Trinidadian or whatnot. So it's important to like, we're very ethnically diverse. We're one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the region. We're very religiously diverse in terms of like, you know, class as well. Like, some people live in shacks, some people live in mansions. We have a couple white people too. So it's like, you know, yeah. But so like, you know, it's country.
He spoke about the white people, and the white people was like, this
like, show over. You will not disparage us.
You did. The white people froze you.
Hello?
Yeah, we're here. You know.
Did I freeze again?
You're back.
Yep. Hello? You can hear me?
We can see you and we can hear you, so don't do anything.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm just gonna nod and hope he sees.
Hello? Okay, good. No, oh my god, I hate this. Okay, y'all was saying anything? Did I miss anything?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, cool.
Cool. That was great.
Phone is making noise. Okay.
Oh no. Shall we announce what our next book club book is going to be? What's it going to be, Linnell? You have the book. Dear Haiti, love Elaine.
It's there.
I hope I'm pronouncing Elaine right.
Elaine or Elaine?
Woo.
Elaine.
I think
we will discover.
Elaine.
I will listen to it on audio because I'm trying to do that more.
And it's fairly short too.
I might do that too.
It's YA, right? Yeah.
Is it?
I think. Is it?
Really?
I might be wrong about the YA thing. I don't know why. I think the cover just gives me YA vibes.
No, they're.
I kind of thought it was like a romance or something. I don't know why.
It's Inkyard Press. I don't know if that helps.
It doesn't say, but it reads.
Is it more new adult then? Because that probably, cover.
Yeah,
that cover gives me
probably.
Yeah.
We need more new adult that's YA-esque, but not like super duper sex heavy.
It is young adult.
I feel like new adult is too.
I can't read. It says
I can tell from covers.
Yeah,
I
it's young adult.
Now. Yeah, I can tell from covers now.
Yeah. What's it even about? I don't even know. But
I don't even know. We just decided it was lighter, so we were going to read it. We wanted to read something more uplifting after this book. And we discovered...
Yeah.
Somebody gets suspended and sent to Haiti.
Oh, okay. So we're going to be seeing the actual Caribbean again in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Solid.
Yeah.
I was just saying that we...
you were saying that you wanted to talk more about... Yeah.
Yeah, we discovered that we discovered that it's hard to find more uplifting, like lighter
Sorry.
Caribbean reads because everybody wants to write. Well, not everybody wants to, but publishing is convinced that only trauma will sell with Caribbean context, and we're getting real tired, guys. So if you know any like lighthearted Caribbean reads, please send them our way, please.
Even in middle grade,
That's about,
Yeah.
it's tough. Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's just perpetual struggle porn, and I'm real tired. This book was like beautifully written, but like I need to read something later after.
I saw it came up on my timeline. 7 Killings.
Oh no,
I
we're not.
haven't finished it.
Love Marlon James, but no, we're not doing that.
Oh my God.
That is like this time 20. It's intense.
I mean, I feel like Caribbean people go through a lot, so we have a lot of struggles to talk about, but our experience is not just defined by just constant struggle. Like, like we're fine too, Sometimes we're fine. So like, could we have a story where we're represented as just fine, Yeah.
Can we just talk about like school and the struggles of doing homework and CXCs? Like, please, somebody?
Listen. At Cape, oh my God!
Oh, I thankfully didn't have to do that.
There's Dreams Beyond by Timmy, and the struggles of like Cape. A little bit.
We completely missed the title and the author.
Yeah, it's about what? Oh, Saajid.
We missed the title and the author.
Dreams Beyond the Shore by Tamika Gibson. Hold on.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is it here. No, this is not it. Wrong book. I grabbed the wrong book on the damn shelf.
Oh.
This is it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's set in Trinidad. It's a YA novel.
Oh my God. Okay, writing that down right now.
Yeah, I feel like I have that. You must have
recommended
recommended
Dreams
it.
Beyond the Shore, Tamika Gibson. It's very like, it's written like almost like a typical YA novel, but it's set in no like trauma or anything like that. It's just like this girl and this boy, and they like each other. And the girl's father is running to be prime minister, so she's kind of like semi-famous.
I love this. I'm going to like be buying this as soon as we're done.
Why didn't you recommend this before?
Yes. Why can't we read this?
So are we?
I don't know. I could reread it, and we could do it again.
We can read.
What?
Sorry, I missed that. Hold on, I'm gonna come out
I'm
of the
down to
chat
read
and
that.
come back in.
I love this chaotic energy.
I know, it's always chaotic. We started really like normally.
And then I feel like I own that book. That sounds very familiar.
It sounds delightful.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I own it. Oh, is it Nayeli?
No.
Nayeli? Thank you for saying you love this book club, even though it feels a little messy right now. Oh, we lost Saajid.
No, he said he was leaving to come back.
Oh.
Yeah. As we wait. I'm just buying this book right now, y'all. Like, just ignore me. I'm currently purchasing a book.
Well, thank you, everybody. We have 5 people viewing us. Hey, y'all.
And our chaotic energy.
Do you have questions for us as we wait for Saajid to come back? And ignore that we're it sounds like we're not reading this book anymore.
I mean, if I can find a copy of Dreams Beyond the Shore, we will definitely be reading that one. But I have to check Amazon.ca because I live in Canada. Oh my God. Okay. Saajid's just gone forever. The white people got him.
Oh my gosh. Oh, sorry. No one has questions. That's okay. We highly recommend the book.
Yes, it is
read it
so good. It is the best book I've read so far this year. It's beautiful. It's fantastically written. It's short. Okay. In my defense, the only other books I've read so far this year are The Hunger Games and whatever the book was I read for Salt Book Club, that fantasy book. So like, but it was so beautiful.
Poppy War.
How was that?
Oh, first of all, I don't like fantasy, and I like this book.
Ooh,
Well,
okay.
let me
That's high praise.
let me walk that back. It's not that I don't like fantasy. I don't often read fantasy. And so I was not prepared to enjoy it, but I really enjoyed it. It's a little intense as well. Content warnings for rape and torture, but like it's really good. Hey,
Of course, that's how Saajid came back.
You came back in on my content warnings.
I was listening to your Puppy War. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Oh.
And I also read what's the other one from the Wayward children's series?
I don't know. I'm behind on that series right now. I need to catch up.
I read 2 of them.
Oh wow.
What
about you, Saajid? What have you been reading since you're back?
I'm reading An Unkindness of Ghosts, River Solomon, the sci-fi book. I'm reading another sci-fi book called Light at the Bottom of the World, which is like London, but sunk underwater, and they live in like this dome, and the character is Muslim, which is really cool. And I'm also reading a book set in Guyana, actually, because, you know, who reads books set in Guyana, I know. So I'm reading a book set in Guyana called A Silent Life. And I'm reading a 4th book too. I can't remember what it was. Oh,
holy, you're reading a lot at once.
Yeah, Kitsch is yeah, I know, 4 books. Kitsch is a fictional biography of Lord Kitchener, who was a famous Calypsonian from Trinidad.
Oh, that's cool. Oh my god. That's you're always doing the coolest books.
Yeah.
I met Nick Stone on Friday.
Oh,
really?
Isn't she the coolest human ever?
She
right?
is.
I've seen her live. She's so good. She's so good.
So good. Oh,
I have one of her books to read. Odd one out. Need to read that.
I have her middle grade book on my shelf right now, and it's really good so far.
Which one is it? Dear Martin?
It's called Clean Getaway. It's like an actual middle grade book about like an 11-year-old, I think. He and his grandmother go on a road trip. It's so cute. I love it.
I love you know that.
I think I was telling you all about this book before.
Yes, are we reading it or not? Because I found it on
we should read
Amazon, so I can.
We could read it after Dare. We could read it after Dare, Elaine.
Okay, I like that vibe.
Yeah, I this was the one that I grabbed by mistake. This is another Trinidadian young adult book.
Oh my god!
This one is a little bit more dark though, but it's not like about Caribbean trauma. It's more just like a murder thriller kind of YA story.
Oh,
you remember that one time I tried to send you guys Murder in the Caribbean? It was not.
No.
I don't remember. The cover was so horrible. I don't get to pick books. I don't get to pick books at this club.
If anybody has heard of a murder mystery Caribbean book.
Ooh. Oh, so there's one that I read in.
There's this. This is the only one I know of.
Yes, that's the only one.
There's one that's set in St. Croix, and he's like a CIA agent, and they keep killing people or something. I'll have to look up the title. So it's like Croix Matter. Does that sound no? Croix Matter.
Never heard of it.
Maybe. Okay, I'll look.
Well, look at us. We have our next 2 reads planned. That's basically 3/4 of the year.
Yeah. So we'll see
half of the year.
So we'll see you back in
April sometime. Yeah, we haven't decided on an actual date for the live show, but it'll be
follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter.
Yes, we should have
and
said
you will
that
get all
in
of the updates.
Yes.
The only the OGs who here till the end. Who here? Anybody still here? Anybody still in the chat?
Oh, there are 2 new people. Hey, y'all.
Oh god, y'all keep the chaotic energy.
That's my cousin. That's my cousin who said yes, Saajid.
Oh my god. Hi, cousin.
Oh wow.
I love the family support.
Yeah, we stand. Thanks, Abira.
So we have Saajid, did you pick our outro song?
Oh yeah.
I don't want to do that. Oh god.
Okay.
I don't even know what song to say.
If you don't want to do it, you said no. And
I don't want to cop out though.
There's no peer
Does
pressure.
anybody else want to volunteer to do it this time? I've done it like the last.
No,
I'm a dancer.
I can play a song. I can't sing a
That's all I-
song.
We'll play a song and we'll all dance to it.
Right. Cool. I'll play the song that was playing all the time while I was in Barbados over Christmas.
Okay.
Okay.
And I don't know why this was the song. If you guys know it, I'll be very
I'm
impressed.
getting ready.
Is it a Barbados song?
That's why I was very confused why it was playing all the time.
Is it Jamaica and Trini?
Oh, gosh.
Hold on, let me see who the singer is and I'll be able to tell you. Because one of them is an American singer, but the other one very obviously isn't. She's Jamaican. The woman's Jamaican. So there you go.
What's her name?
That's why it was playing. Shensia.
Shensia.
Okay.
I know Shensia.
You know what song? Okay, do you know the song I'm about to play? You know
is it with Tiger?
Oh.
Yes.
Is this the one where she's like best? Yes.
I got you singing. I got you singing.
That is the biggest song for the freaking year. Oh my god, I love it.
Didn't she just win an award?
Wait, what?
Didn't she just win an award at the Grammys?
I didn't watch the Grammys, so I wouldn't know.
Oh.
Okay.
First thing in the morning, when I wake up,
Saajid, stop. Way too
Bless.
Love this for us.
I'm dancing like a white person.
On vacation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm emulating.
And there we go. That was our outro of us just dancing like white people for a minute.
We broke our Caribbean card, please, everybody.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
Oh. You all are the best.
It's stuck again. I'm stuck again.
No, you're not. We can hear you. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up. Thank y'all for joining. I mean, we have to wait for Saajid to end the video, but thank y'all for joining us at Bashment Book Club. This has been a great hour-long chat about Brother by David Cherryandi. We recommend it. It's published by MNS here in Canada. Hello. I don't know if there is an American imprint that publishes it, but you can get it on Amazon. We will see you in April for Dear Haiti, Love Elaine. And until then, enjoy your reading, whatever you end up reading. I hope I read more books between now and then. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Okay.
Have you ended it?
It's loading. The ending is loading. I don't know if it officially ended.
This is
I think it's still live.
No, it's definitely still live.
Wait, hold on. It's definitely ending. It's spinning.
Hold on.
Okay, everybody, make sure to subscribe to page and follow Linnell's blog. Links will be in the description.